Good morning, everyone. For those who do not know me yet, my name is Ron Levine from Mindfulness and Blue Jeans. I started practicing mindfulness and insight meditation 25 years ago, during a time when I was dealing with clinical anxiety and depression and a panic disorder that had blown up into agoraphobia. So I was trapped at home, I was on disability from work, couldn't go past the front door without having a panic attack, and happened to get paired up with a psychologist who, even back in 1998, had been practicing and teaching mindfulness and insight meditation for several decades, and that was my introduction to this practice. I did not think this practice was going to do anything. So no one was more surprised than I was when it kind of did everything. Or I can't say it did everything. It's still doing everything. And I'm very grateful. And I really enjoy offering sessions like this. Calming anxiety by living mindfully, where I can share some of the techniques that others have shown me and that I've discovered for myself over the years and still discovering for myself. As we all, as Ram Dass said, as we're all walking each other home, right? Helping each other out. So let's jump in with today's edition, okay? I always like to begin my sitting by imagining I am suspended from the ceiling by a piece of string attached to the top of my head, as a nice cue to sit up straight without adding any extra tension to do so. If we have some tension here right now, mental tension, emotional tension, physical tension, those are allowed. Those are fully allowed to be here. I often find that my reaction to feeling tension is I try to get rid of it. And how do we get rid of something? Well, we try to force it away, which means we're bringing more tension to the tension that's already here in an attempt to, get rid of tension. That's never worked for me. So if there's some tension here, we can just let it be tension. There's tension in life. It comes, it goes. So if there's some tension here, it can be tension. It can leave in its own time, which may or may not be today. I also like to notice what is supporting me, what's holding me up. A chair, cushion, floor. So there's a feeling of grounding. Even if I don't feel particularly grounded, there is something supporting me, and I can allow it to do so. So let's take a moment to notice what is supporting us from below, as well as this gentle suspension from the ceiling above, and whatever else happens to be in between the two for us right now, however it is. And if you haven't already, you may begin to bring your attention to your breathing. And you may notice your breathing shifts, changes, as you bring attention to it. Sometimes because we think we need a certain kind of breathing for our meditation. Sometimes simply because, well, it's very challenging to observe the breathing directly without making some kind of change to it. That's what we do a lot, right? We interfere. Try to fix. Try to make things a certain way. And there is a place for that in this practice. But I've also found there's a place for noticing that tendency without necessarily obeying its every command. So I found it very valuable to simply notice the breathing as it is, without trying to control or shape it. And if I notice that, well, there's still some controlling and shaping, which again is very hard not to do, well, okay. I notice that that is here as well. There's no need to try to control the controlling any more than there is to bring tension to tension. Right now it's less about doing something with what's here and simply being with what's here. Including being with our feelings about what's here, our reactions to what's here. That's also what's here. Now, those can be here as well. Now, one of the most powerful techniques I've found for dealing with anxiety is really bringing the attention wholly to the physical body. That helps to get us out of the mind a little bit and helps to break that mind-body cycle. That one where we're generating anxiety-driven storylines in our mind that get our bodies keyed up. And then because the body is keyed up, the subconscious mind thinks there really is an emergency and spins up faster, which gets the body going more. And you see where that goes. So, if we bring our attention to the body, our whole attention to the body, it helps to break that cycle a bit. We start getting out of the storyline mode. And in fact, start to notice how the storyline mode keeps coming up. As we bring the attention back to the body, we start to see with greater acuity how we keep getting pulled away and what's pulling us away. And for me, it's usually, those storylines, typically getting generated in an attempt to try to feel prepared for something. Feel like I got my bases covered. Try to make sure I'm not getting caught off guard by something. And ironically, we engage in that kind of thinking as a way to try to reduce our anxiety, and all it does is increase it. The nature of any vicious cycle, right? Now, sometimes it's very obvious where we're holding tension in the body. For me, it's very obvious when I'm clutching the stomach or hunching the shoulders. Something that I find is a little more subtle, flies under the radar a little bit, but is actually no less exhausting, no less strenuous, is all the tension that I'm holding above the neckline. Starting right at the crown of the head. There's a part of the body that I don't really think about. I don't usually pay attention to that. I'm not usually thinking about that. Can we take a minute and breathe just with the crown of the head? However it is, however it feels. I tend to be very visually oriented, so when I deliberately bring attention and breathing to the crown of my head, the first thing I do is picture what I think the crown of my head looks like. But then I think, well, how does it feel if I'm not picturing it? If I'm not looking at it in my mind's eye, but just feeling it. Breathing and just feeling. That little area right at the top of the head. Right where we're imagining that string is suspending us from the ceiling. Or perhaps at this point you would prefer to cut that string, so there is no suspension. Perhaps we start to feel the tug of a thought or a storyline, a mental image. That's fine. That's going to happen. We have minds that think. They like to offer us all kinds of stuff. We don't have to take everything it offers us. I mean, it'll certainly offer all these things again. Probably before we're even done with our sitta. So it's not the last chance. We just come back to our focal point. Breathing. On top of the head. You may start to feel a shift in sensation, in tension. You may not. We're not attempting to achieve something here, other than seeing what comes up, what happens, and staying with that, and seeing what happens in the course of us trying to stay with that. Not interfering, not fixing, observing. What happens when we don't interfere? How do things play out? You may start to let the breath energy from the top of the head start to flow down into the temples. Not trying to change anything, just seeing what the breath energy in the temples feels like. Seeing what happens when we just see what it feels like. In time, we can let that energy start to flow down around the eyes. There tends to be that subtle squeezing around the eyes. When there's anxiety, tension. Like a wild animal that feels like it's under threat. I personally find it very informative when I start to move this energy and attention to my ears. I actually carry tension in my ears. When I feel stressed out, I notice I pull my ears back. I mean, obviously you can't see it, but I can feel it. Again, like a cat that feels threatened. So that's become one of the first places that I look, that I feel, that I bring attention to when I'm gauging how much stress and tension I'm holding in the body. I typically check the stomach first, but then right after that, I go to the ears. As I've learned over time, that's where I carry a lot of tension. And that's what we're doing here, is checking out different areas. Learning a bit about ourselves. Where do we each hold tension? What's it actually feel like? What happens when we bring attention to it and just see what it actually feels like? And I found again and again and again that simply shining the light of attention on these things has a way of being enough. It really sets the conditions for the right things to arise in their own time. Or for things to leave in their own time. And it turns out a lot of the time that things weren't able to leave in their own time because I was interfering and fixing and trying to make them leave before their time. Before they've had a chance to say their piece. So what we're doing here is giving them that chance. Opening up instead of closing down. We're listening. We're feeling. Opening to experience. Using the breathing as our anchor. And I've found that when we open and listen, breathe, shine that light of attention. Our path has a way of unfolding before us naturally. Thank you, everyone. I'll hang on for a few minutes if anyone would like to share any questions or observations in the chat. Ren, yeah, the ears for you as well. Yeah. Amy as well. Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, it's something that never really gets talked about. Like for the longest time, I figured, well, I must be the only one. It's one of those things you always hear about the stomach, you hear about the shoulders, you hear about clenching the jaw, and so forth. No one ever talked about ears. I'm like, am I the only one pinning my ears? Like I can feel it, like I'm pinning my ears back. And that's actually become a really large part of my practice, is bringing attention there and breathing there for sometimes an entire 20 minutes, because my morning sitting every day is about 20 to 30 minutes. And sometimes I'll just spend the whole sitting with that focus. And yeah, they'll ease up eventually. They don't ease up if I try to make them ease up, because again, bringing tension to tension, you can't force them to. But just bringing that attention there, that's the only thing I've ever found that really works. And we don't get to say when or how. We just get to set the conditions and see how it plays out. But I'm glad that resonated for some other folks as well. Because again, it's one you don't usually hear about. Chris, glad you enjoyed. Yeah, move the energy with intention. That's a great summation right there. Moving energy with intention. That's a very good summation of the practice. I like that. Hey, Miriam. Good to see you. Look at the tension to inform us. My poor stomach. Yeah, right? That's just it. Yeah, I told a story. I don't know if it was here last week or one of my other sessions, how there was a time a number of years ago when I was having some kind of stomach issue for several days, and it was annoying. And I find stomach issues doubly annoying because when they're around for a while, they start to spark up anxiety, because that's, like I say, for me, and I think for most people, when we feel anxiety, one of the first places we feel it physically is in the stomach. So even if I'm not already feeling some kind of anxiety, if I start having stomach issues, it starts to kind of kick up anxiety just from that association. And I was experiencing this for several days, and finally noticed one morning during one of my sittings, I'm like noticing the extent to which I'm trying to force my stomach to stop feeling upset. So I'm like creating all of this tension around it and trying to squelch it down. And it suddenly just dawns on me like, wait a minute, what the hell am I doing? I've got a stomach that's already upset. And here I am fucking with it, badgering it, as if that's going to help. And I just had this vantage point from a distance for a second, and I was like, holy crap, what the hell am I doing? And I felt this sudden rush of compassion for my own stomach and was just like, holy crap, I'm sorry. I can't believe I've been doing this. This is not helping. I'm wicked sorry. You're already upset, and here I am kicking you while you're down. Let's work through this together. Right? That was a really big turning point for me. And a couple of days later, just settled on its own. And this is what the Buddha is really talking about when he's teaching us how to alleviate our own suffering. We can't stop pain. Pain's going to happen. Discomfort's going to happen. Suffering is what comes up when we don't deal with pain and discomfort skillfully. So that's exactly what I was doing, was I was taking this pain and creating all kinds of suffering out of it, lumping a whole bunch of other shit on top that was completely unnecessary. Again, in an attempt to make things better, and ironically making things worse. So that's what we want to see here is, okay, where can I listen instead of trying to order things around? Especially things that ain't going to follow our orders, including parts of our own body. There's got to be a better way. That's what we're finding here. That better way. I'm glad this resonated for you. Around tension, I can feel a lot lately. It's tricky. I'm trying not to control it and let it be, but I can feel I'm angry deep down. It's there. Yeah. And that's what we're here to see. We're not just here to see that it's here and to let it be here. We're here to see how difficult it is for us to let it be here. And to see what comes up for us when we try to do that. And anger is something that comes up a lot. Because what is anger really? What is the function of anger? What is the purpose of anger? Anger is that thing that gives us that burst of energy to be able to deal with a situation where we need to gain or regain some control for our own safety. So here we are in a situation where we might feel threatened by a sensation that's within us. And what's more threatening than something that's already within us, right? And we find that, well, we can't control it. That's going to stir up some shit, some fear, some anger. That's going to come up. That's not a problem. It's not pleasant, but that's not a problem in the context of this practice. It's what we came to see. Oh, here's what comes up. And that's another data point in our data gathering. Ah, this is what comes up. This is what it feels like. This is what we came to see. This is what unfolds. Can we breathe with that unfolding? Chris, you're part cat? Yes, we have 6 here. We are crazy cat people. So it's, yeah, I identify as part cat. And that's not the only way either. We have a running joke in this house with one of our cats who's particularly anxious. And we make the joke that he takes after his father. That'd be me. Sharon, I love the clock and calendar and breathing into my coffee cup. I see the sunset and another destination. Yeah. We can breathe into anything. You can breathe into anything. It's always interesting thinking about that with the body. Like, we can send breathing into the stomach and feel that, and we can send it into the chest and feel that. We can't really send it per se into, the left hand and feel that. But yet, it's getting there, isn't it? The breath is touching every single cell in the body, whether we can feel it or not. So even when we visualize where the breath is going internally, even if we can't technically feel it, we know it's getting there. And we can even visualize that outwardly as well. Amy, at some point I'd be super interested to know your thoughts of health anxiety. When I get overloaded in life, I turn to feeling any twinge in my body, convinced something is dreadfully wrong with me. And of course that spirals to more anxiety, even if the original overwhelm is gone. Yeah, that's a fantastic description of what the Buddha's talking about with suffering. That reminds me of the classic story of the second arrow, which is one where, a guy gets shot with an arrow. And rather than addressing the fact that he's got shot with an arrow, he's looking at the arrow and thinking, well, geez, I wonder who shot me with this. And I wonder where they were standing. And I wonder who made this arrow. And, oh, there's feathers on it. I wonder what kind of bird these feathers are from. It's like, dude, you're bleeding out. What are you doing? It's like, the second arrow is the suffering, the thought lines, the storylines, the shit that we're laying on top. I did a session a few days ago where I was talking quite a bit about all experience. And when I say experience, I was talking about it in the context particularly of pain and discomfort, is mental. And what I mean by that is, of course, there is physical discomfort. But to identify it as discomfort requires perception and interpretation at a mental level. What we may find to be physically uncomfortable in one moment, we may find pleasurable in another, depending on our interpretation and our perception and the context at the time. So if we feel a twinge in the body, and that's a word I use myself a lot, yeah. I feel that somewhere in the body. That's a sensation. What are we doing with that sensation? What's the perception, the interpretation, the memories, fears? And what we're doing here is bringing attention to the process of these things unfolding and interacting with each other. And again, this is how that mind-body cycle gets kicked off. We have a certain perception of a sensation. We have an interpretation. This is all happening against the background of our previous life experience, our fears, our desires. So we're shaping something. We're not passive recipients of our experience. When something arises, we've already brought a lifetime of shit as a background against which this is arising. So we're bringing something to this experience and shaping this experience in real time. And if we're not doing that skillfully and with some awareness, we tend not to shape the most pleasant experience. And not even just not the most pleasant one, but the most accurate one. So what we want to do is bring attention to that process in itself and get to know that process. One of the catch-22s here is we hate uncertainty. So when something uncertain is happening, we run away from that and we try to find absolute certainty. And in the course of doing so, we never get to actually know uncertainty, which means we remain uncertain about uncertainty. Again, another bullshit cycle. What we're doing here is we're turning our attention to that process, seeing that it's bullshit, and saying, well, wait a minute, let me try something different. And we just watch that process for a while and get to know it. See what it's like. And that doesn't mean it's necessarily going to become a pleasant process. It's not even supposed to become a pleasant process. The point is, it starts to become more familiar. And with that familiarity comes less uncertainty. And now we begin to unravel this process. So, obviously, I could go on for hours on a topic like that, but I hope that helps for now. Sharon wants to see my cat. They're downstairs. If I opened up the door, this place would get taken over. You'd see the thing where like the camera goes sideways and a record player breaks and like the whole it'd just be like a smoking crater here. And they're not polite animals. We don't have we can have the cats or we can have nice things here. We've opted for the cats. I'm glad that landed for you, Amy. Cheers. All right, folks, I think I will wrap it up there. I'm glad this landed for a lot of people today. This is a practice I find very valuable for myself, as I've mentioned, carrying a lot of tension above the neckline. So I invite you throughout the day, keep this in mind. Bring it into your practice. Bring it on the cushion. Bring it off the cushion. Bring it into traffic. Bring it into the supermarket. Bring it into your interactions with others. And listen. See what you find. See what you find. Folks, thank you so much for being with me. And I look forward to seeing you all again real soon. Cheers.